No permanent allies, no permanent enemies. Is that still relevant today? Charlene Nelson here, your go-to power building CEO at 2541, where our goal is to activate 200,000 families over the next 5 years to realize and move power. So, no permanent allies, no permanent enemies. Is that still relevant today? That was a question that came up with a participant. I was like, oh, let's talk about it. And the question is, absolutely. So how is it still relevant today? Now, let me first give the caveat. Some folks use different language besides allies, enemies. Some folks use opponents or foes, whatever language works for you. Let's address and talk about that organizing principle and if in fact it's relevant today. We're going to talk about 2 quick examples. So yes, it's still relevant, and let's talk about the examples. First example, let's talk about what's happening with the Teamsters and their not so present endorsement of the Democratic presidential candidate Harris. So since 2000, the Teamsters, they claim to be the largest and most diverse union in the nation that champions folks like freight drivers and warehouse workers. They've endorsed a Democratic candidate since 2000. This year, not only are they not endorsing a Democratic presidential candidate, they aren't endorsing any candidate. So, no permanent allies, no permanent enemies. They're choosing to go a different route. That's example number 1. Example number 2, y'all, let's get into all the political tea. Former President Dick Cheney and his daughter, Wyoming Representative Liz Cheney, they're not backing the Republican candidate. Now, with a traditional Republican conservative background, they chose to go a different route. And not just a different route of not endorsing the Republican candidate, they're choosing to endorse the Democratic presidential candidate Harris, VP Harris. So when we talk about no permanent allies, no permanent enemies, it is still relevant today, and we're seeing it play out in this current presidential election. Now, if I was to push us a little further, I would say that this is something important to consider. Why? Because sometimes our allies need to change from campaign to campaign. There might not always be aligned self-interest. There may not be always aligned contributions. So we have to think about like, hey, am I with the right partner at this time? Now, this doesn't mean that you're gonna lose a friend, and you might. It doesn't mean that it's a bad thing to change. Remember, public is very different than private. It does mean that you're exploring different ways that you can push, access, and extend your power by being more intentional about who you ally with and who you don't ally with. And we need to constantly look at that power map to understand who and who we shouldn't ally with. So y'all, that's it. No permanent allies, no permanent enemies. And is it still true today? Absolutely. This is Charlene Nelson, and thank you for your time today. Bye.